Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Today we are looking at the top 10 ugliest car models in NASCAR history. This is going to be something interesting, so let's watch this together till the end. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe. We are currently growing rapidly together with your help. I really appreciate every single one of you. So why not hit that subscribe button, like this video, and let's get on with the reaction.
NASCAR has held thousands of races on hundreds of different tracks across its top three divisions, drawing in millions over the decades. But if you ask any one of those millions who watched those races, they'll tell you that the cars and the guys and girls who drove them are what drew them to the event more so than the venue. And while personalities have always been NASCAR's biggest attraction, a slick-looking automobile can be an instant crowd pleaser too. But in everyone's haste to put a hit car out on the track, there are inevitably some misses, some of which live on in infamy. Maybe car manufacturers wanted to bend the rules, looks be damned. Or maybe it was just an embarrassingly cheesy fad. Whatever the case might have been, here are my picks for the top 10 ugliest cars to ever be fielded in regular NASCAR competition. But be warned, this list is just my opinion. Beauty is subjective, so don't get too mad down in the comments. With that being said, let's get into it. Number 10, the 1970 Dodge Daytona and Plymouth Superbird. Alright, hold on. Let me explain myself first. Be honest with me. When you first saw these cars, you did not like them. You merely got used to seeing them. My opinion is shared with...
Yeah, I don't really like those cars. They look weird. And old.
Larry Rathgeb, who was in charge of Chrysler Corp's NASCAR program. By 1968, Chrysler was getting stomped by Ford. Richard Petty was still winning, but that was about it. Chrysler had a missile division, yes, a missile division. They made ballistic missiles for the Army. But with missile development being sent over to the Air Force, Chrysler Corp was shutting their missile program down. So they offered anyone laid off a position with the automotive department. Larry Rathgeb asked a few aero guys with the missile program to fix their 68 Dodges, and every single person he talked to made the same fixes. Clean up the lines, add a nose cap, and a big rear wing, taller than even the roof so that it only catches clean air. Larry said it was the ugliest thing he had ever seen, but his engineers assured him that the car would win and win big, so he begrudgingly greenlit the car. Now at the time, NASCAR had a rule that in order to run a car in the top division, you had to produce and sell at least 500 cars. Dodge sold the bare minimum number necessary and Plymouth followed suit.
Wow, did you know that, guys? I totally did not know that. That's something we learned today.
Dodge fielded the Daytona and Plymouth the Superbird. You can tell them apart because the Plymouth has its wing mounted further forward on the deck lid. In 1969, the car won in its very first showing at Talladega under dubious circumstances, after a driver boycott and a possible scoring error. But in 1970, it went full-time, won the Daytona 500 with Pete Hamilton, and pretty much all the events at the big tracks, and Bobby Isaac, who ran a Dodge Daytona, nabbed the cup that year. After that, though, NASCAR effectively banned the Daytona and Superbird.
Wow, just look at that. Admire this car for a second. That looks ugly for a NASCAR car. No, bro, no. That's not how we do it.
Exotic wing cars never ran in NASCAR again. People then and now were very split on the car, and its obvious rule manipulations put it just barely on this list. Number 9, the 1998 and 99 Ford Taurus. Going into history as the first model ever fielded in NASCAR's modern era to be of a four-door construction only, the Taurus was a strange-looking beast to say the least. Its street-faring counterpart was ugly as sin, and its NASCAR equivalent carried over some of its design features. It had a round back window which made rearview mirror visibility quite limited, and the front headlights and rounded grille made it look like a beached four-eyed fish.
That's what I was about to say. Like the headlights and that other round thing, they look totally they look bad, bro. That ruins the whole car.
Gasping for air. Mark Martin didn't like the look of the car at all, but it didn't stop him from winning 8 races in its first year. As ugly as it might have been, the thing did cut through the air even better than its older Thunderbird siblings from 1996 and 97. Jeff Burton, Mark Martin, and Dale Jarrett stomped the field with it in its 2 years of competition. And in 1999, Jarrett won the championship. Stupid-looking, breaking the decades-long tradition of running 2 doors, and being an overall eyesore be damned, the thing got results. Number 8, the 1972 AMC Matador. In 1972, none other than Roger Penske set out to bring the American Motor Company into NASCAR, tapping IndyCar driver Mark Donohue and rising NASCAR star Bobby Allison to be his drivers. The car they fielded was the AMC Matador, which would go on to be affectionately nicknamed the Flying Brick. Remember, this is 1972. 2 years after the Ford Torino Talladega and Dodge Daytona changed the game of aerodynamics. And AMC was putting out a car that looked like something from 10 years ago, which was to be expected from AMC, honestly. They had some very strange but eye-catching designs from back in the day. Whether it was the Pacer, which looked like a goldfish bowl, or the Gremlin, which looked like it came stock with an 8-track player and seats that already smelled like cigarettes straight from the factory. AMC turned heads, but for all the wrong reasons. And the Matador was actually right in line with what you'd expect from them during the 1970s. Its lumpy design would be smoothed out over the years, and although it didn't win in 1972, it won 5 races from 1973 to 1975, after Penske got the engineers from AMC to make the car actually drivable. The Matador was extremely unpopular with drivers, but among fans it did have a cult following, much like AMC's have today. So here it sits at 8th on this list.
I think
Let's skip this ad.
7. The 1986 Oldsmobile Delta 88 and Buick LeSabre. I'm kind of cheating here by putting 2 distinctly different cars in one position, but it's my video and I'll do what I want. In 1981, Buick and Olds fielded the Regal and the Cutlass respectively, in response to new rule changes handed down by NASCAR. They did quite well in those early years, and Buick especially, winning the championship 3 years in a row. But by 1985, their day in the sun was over, and Ford, Chevy, and Pontiac were clearly ahead with their forward-thinking designs in the ongoing 80s aero wars. So Buick and Oldsmobile changed models and introduced the newly revamped LeSabre and Delta 88, and they were ugly as hell. They looked like a ramshackle street stock put together by somebody under the influence of alcohol for a local short track race. Not a NASCAR top-tier series ride.
Yeah.
Both looked boxy and unwieldy, but the Oldsmobile had these weird-looking mirrored headlight things that looked all sorts of cursed. I know most things in the 80s looked cheesy and awful, but come on, they could have done better. The 81 Regal looked great, and the 1986 Monte Carlo SS is an absolute classic.
Like, these two look much better than that other one. Like, seriously, they can put more work into it. Like, why not, bro?
So why did we end up with these 2 abominations unto God? In 1986, Buick and Olds combined for just 4 wins. And in 1987, they cleaned up the line to make them look somewhat passable as a respectable NASCAR stock car. And by 1988, both Oldsmobile and Buick would drop their models and return to the Cutlass and Regal respectively, which looked leagues better, thank God. Number 6, the 1995 Pontiac Grand Prix. Yeah, the 80s and 90s are going to appear a lot on this list. It was just a product of the time, so get used to it. The Pontiac from 1989 through 1994 always looked kind of wonky with its faux splitter and bulbous design, but the 95 variant takes the cake. At a time when every other car manufacturer was trying to make their cars as sleek and aerodynamic as possible, here comes Pontiac with this shovel-nosed monstrosity. It looks like a little kid's interpretation of what a race car should look like.
Okay, this isn't too bad. Like, the others we saw were a lot worse. This... You can count it.
This had hit the track in 1987. I might have given it a pass, as that was the period of throwing everything at the wall in a desperate attempt to see what stuck. But by 1995, this puzzle should have been solved. It won only 2 races in 1995 with Kyle Petty and Ward Burton, and only then did Pontiac realize it was time for a revamp, and they debuted the superb 96 Grand Prix. Throughout the rest of the 90s and early 2000s, Pontiac would be pretty hit and miss, but after their 95 screw-up, nobody could argue that their cars didn't at least look the part of a mean race car. Number 5, the 1981 and 82 Chevy Malibu. A favorite of short-track street stock racers today, the Chevy Malibu of the early 80s is a blocky, Minecraft-inspired mess. I could probably make a more aerodynamic design with nothing but Legos at my disposal. With its wide-open flat grille and uninspired A and C pillar lines, I'm surprised anyone even thought of running this car. But in 1982, Dave Marcus would score his 5th and final Cup Series win with it, at a rain-shortened race at Richmond Raceway. Then, much like today, the Malibu found its calling at the short tracks where aero didn't matter. But even still, it wasn't going to win any beauty pageants. Still, I can't get over how blocky this car was. I mean, its 1970s variants at least looked the part of a race car. Hell, some of them even looked pretty slick. So how did we regress so much in just a few years? Whatever the case, Chevy revamped the Monte Carlo into the SS model for 1983, and that was the only model of Chevy going forward. Good riddance. Number 4, the 1981 and 82 Ford Thunderbird. Derogatorily and rightfully nicknamed the Boxy Bird, the 81 and 82 Thunderbird was hopelessly inadequate in the aerodynamics department. It looked pretty similar to the Chevy Malibu of the same model year, but at least the Malibu was a pretty minimalist and simple construction. The T-Bird, on the other hand, had this weird design with the B and C pillar so that the back seat windows looked like a slit window from a prison or something. On the street, the Bird looked like the type of grocery getter your grandpa would drive to church.
So
and on
true.
the track, it drove like he was still behind the wheel, which is to say, slow as hell. In 61 races in 1981 and 82, the Boxy Bird only nabbed 9 wins. Its most famous win actually came in 1983, when a young Bill Elliott scored his very first win at Riverside driving an old boxy bird he hadn't gotten rid of yet. That year, Ford had introduced the more aerodynamic model and won back fans and drivers alike. Just never...
This is a bit too long, I would say. I don't think it works for racing cars, bro. It's too long.
Narrowly avoiding an entire decade of disappointment.
Looks heavy as well.
I know the 1981 rules package changes caught a lot of manufacturers off guard, but Ford took the cake in bad early 80s designs, hands down. Number 3, the 1951 Nash Ambassador.
What is that?
Starting off as NASCAR's first official pace car, eventually somebody had the idea to just start driving it around in the race itself. And for the life of me, I don't know why they decided to do that. The Ambassador was a big, bulky sedan that was way heavier than the two doors of the day. Maybe you take a look at its sleek rear cabin and think it must have been a breakthrough in aerodynamics, but the vast majority of tracks NASCAR raced on at that time were dirt, and only Darlington was big enough to even entertain the idea of aerodynamics. And just look at those covered wheel wells. How are you even supposed to change the tires on this thing?
Bro,
Despite its litany of issues, you might be surprised to learn that this car actually won a race at the old Charlotte dirt track. No relation to the Charlotte Motor Speedway of today. Wait, okay, what out of his skull mad lad went out and did that? Well, none other than our old friend Curtis Turner, the rich playboy from Virginia. If anybody from back in the day was going to do it, it was going to be him. As hideous and unwieldy as the Beetle-looking car was, it should come as no surprise that it is tied with Jaguar with the fewest number of wins of any manufacturer at one apiece. Oh, and just a fun fact, Nash would eventually merge with Hudson and create AMC, the American Motor Company. So you can actually, in some roundabout way, thank this car for the Matador earlier in this list. Number 2, the 1985 Chevy Celebrity. By the time the 80s rolled around, the Xfinity series, then called the Busch series, was looking to downsize to V6 motors to more closely resemble cars out on the street. The Chevy Novas, being fielded by most of the teams, were holdovers from the late 70s, so Chevy needed a new model for the new engines. But their offering might have been one of the cheesiest looking 80s cars to ever be put to the asphalt. It looked something like a librarian would drive, and the flat back glass must have caused an ungodly amount of turbulence, which was a problem found with the old Monte Carlo a few years back, so I don't know why they went with this design choice. The Celebrity was quickly retired, but for a brief moment in time, it was the ugliest thing out on the track for the Saturday races. Since this was the first era of major sponsorship deals and overarching manufacturer contracts, a lot of Cup guys who wanted to run the preliminary races were forced into this thing. Darrell Waltrip as well as Dale Earnhardt both found themselves piloting Celebrities whether they wanted to or not. But with so much talent on payroll and money being fronted by GM, the Celeb won plenty of races, but thankfully never made it into NASCAR Cup Series competition. Thank goodness. And finally, number 1, the 2007 through 2010 Car of Tomorrow. Nowadays, the Car of Tomorrow is looked back on fondly by the sports young.
Okay, these are not as bad. Like, that Beetle was bad, bro. Like, that does not work for racing, bro. No way.
Who grew up with it. But when this car was first unveiled in 2006, the NASCAR world was disgusted. This lumpy, top-heavy design was not at all futuristic looking, but the real deal breakers were two things. First, the front splitter scoop was specifically designed to deflect debris that might cover up the front grille, but in reality, it just made things worse. On top of that, the splitter would dig into the ground and cause severe damage and send the car into the air. The other no-go was the rear wing. NASCAR fans had watched every car in the field sport a rear blade spoiler since the 70s, and to change that basic design feature of every car was tantamount to sacrilege. Not only that, but the new wing would cause cars to go airborne in a heartbeat. However, in its first race in 2007, the weird-looking car put on a good show. But the eventual race winner, Kyle Busch, would have this to say about it.
I'm still not a very big fan of these things. I can't stand to drive them. They suck.
Drivers complained about its handling, but NASCAR had developed the COT over safety concerns with the old Gen 4 cars. Its lumpy-looking design was actually packed with safety modifications. Energy-absorbing foam was placed in the doors, there were more spacious crushing zones, the driver was moved further towards the center of the car, and the roof was raised to allow for more clearance for the driver's head. Looks be damned, the COT was the very first generation of car ever fielded to not have a single fatality to its name. In that respect, it did its job remarkably well. However, NASCAR replaced the wing with the old spoiler by mid-2010, and in 2011 they even changed the splitter. However, the problems with them turning into makeshift bulldozers anytime they even got close to the grass still persist to this day. But you might notice I haven't mentioned any manufacturers yet. This car was essentially a spec car that the manufacturers had no inputs on except the engine and the model decals. That was it. So it even killed off the era of make and model individuality. So that means that this list will most likely remain unchanged forever unless something major happens. And if that doesn't put the COT at number 1 on this list, I really don't know what will.
That's
So
sweet.
there it
That's
is, the
sweet.
10 ugliest cars ever fielded in NASCAR competition.
Wow. Wow, that was awesome, guys. Like, there was some cars, like, I can't say all 10 of these were ugly. There were some cool ones. I wouldn't mind, like, personally, I don't mind them at all. But that Beetle one and the other square long one we saw, they are bad, bro. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I would love to read them, hear them out. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. It truly helps me out as well. And I guess that's it for today's video. Peace out.